Welcome. My name is Diana Van Vliet. I am the National Director of Outreach and Engagement for the American Lung Association's Healthy Air campaign. And I am joined here with Maggie Stogner and Elizabeth Joy Hersfeld Kamprith, who I will introduce momentarily. But you are in the right place if you are here to view Unbreathable, the fight for healthy air. This is what we're here today to talk about. This film is a timely, powerful look at 50 years of the Clean Air Act. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary this year in 2020. And the challenges we still face to ensure healthy air for everyone. Weaving historical milestones with current day stories of environmental justice, this film is an excellent tool for educational and community engagement. And I have to say that working at the American Lung Association, we were overjoyed and honored to be a part of this film in a supporting role to Maggie and Elizabeth in the American University Center for Environmental Filmmaking and Center for Environmental Policy. So I will go ahead and introduce our esteemed speakers. Maggie Burnett Stogner is the Executive Director of the Center for Environmental Filmmaking at American University School of Communication. She's also the director of Unbreathable, the fight for healthy air. She's been directing, producing, and writing award-winning documentaries for 30 years. Her work spans topics from environmental to ancient civilizations to today's social and political issues. Maggie was a film producer at National Geographic for 10 years and supervised over 200 documentaries for their signature series Explore, including many expedition films to remote corners of the world. Through her production company, Blue Bear Films, she creates large screen films and immersive media for world touring museum exhibitions for National Geographic, the Smithsonian Institution, Lucasfilm, and the Canadian Museum of Civilization, and others. We're also joined by Elizabeth Hersfeld Kamprith, who's an award-winning filmmaker focused on telling character-driven stories at the intersection of the natural world and society. She is the producer of Unbreathable. Her films have been featured topics from the oil industry in North America to youth in Honduras, and have screened at film festivals across the United States on Maryland Public Television and the World Channel. Elizabeth has worked with physical scientists, social scientists, economists, legal scholars, government officials, nonprofits, and artists to tell compelling stories about the complexity we face in solving major environmental problems. So welcome, Maggie and Elizabeth. I'm so happy to be joined here with you virtually today. I would love to hear from both of you a little bit more about why you were inspired to make this film and what was your goal in creating this film?
Yeah, Diana, thank you so much for inviting us. And I just want to say what an incredible partnership it has been with the American Lung Association and our American University Center for Environmental Filmmaking and the AU Center for Environmental Policy. I mean, it's just extraordinary when you have such great partners to work with, and it makes such a big difference. And when we first dove in on this film, oh my gosh, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, it was, you know, that kind of sense of, we know we want to do something about the 50-year anniversary for the Clean Air Act. There's such great history, such important history there, but we also wanted to do something that would seriously engage people today in community and civic action, because there's more to be done. And I mean, in the course of researching and developing this film, it was eye-opening to me that almost 50% of people in the United States live in areas with some form of debilitating air pollution, that so many children still suffer from asthma. I mean, I knew there were pockets, but I didn't know it was quite that widespread. And so we really set out to make a film that could tell the history, to show the bipartisan nature of coming together to make a difference, as well as to highlight areas and very personal stories of communities that are being severely affected by high levels of air pollution. And now, of course, more recently, we've learned that those same areas now are also being very heavily disproportionately hit by cases and deaths of COVID. So, you know, it's something that evolved over time, and fortunately, Elizabeth was able to join the project as a producer and field producer, and was really the person capturing those very personal stories that help us, just understand how serious this issue is.
Yeah, I thank you, Diana, for that introduction. And as Maggie mentioned, I was brought on about halfway through production to capture some of those elements of the story that are a little bit more personal in the communities. And I think that is a brilliant aspect of this film for a lot of reasons, because I think it provides some emotional context to the Clean Air Act, which ultimately, one thing I learned from this experience is that it's a public health act, and it really is set up to protect people's health. And what we were finding with these communities and around the country, really, people's health are impacted on the day-to-day basis when they're exposed to so much air pollution. And I think that was a great part of the film that we could bring to light, and show that context, and show that in the context of the Clean Air Act.
I totally agree. And from the Lung Association's perspective, 2020 is such an exciting year because, we're celebrating the amazing progress in the 50 years of the Clean Air Act. And it's I think, really important to take a step back and not take it for granted, and look at the amazing reductions that we've had in really dangerous pollutants. But at the same time, take a good hard look at the communities who are still waiting for those benefits. And to your point, Elizabeth, I think the storytelling in this film is so powerful. And I would love to hear, I know you both did a lot of just amazing interviews with these people who are impacted day to day and who are leading to clean up the air in their communities. What did you learn from the individuals who you interviewed for this film?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth, please, because I have to say Mary's interview just is, I can see it day in my head without watching the film.
Yeah, I think for me, I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with a lot of these local activists and leaders in fighting for clean air. And one story that I'll touch on, that her interview didn't make it into the final cut of the film, but she was a pediatric doctor just outside of Pittsburgh and worked with the community of Clairton, who has historically some of the worst air in our country. And she led a study on asthma rates with kids at some of the local schools, and just found an unprecedented amount of prevalence of asthma in these schools, and was able to make the connection through the data that it is the proximity to air pollution that is causing their high rates of asthma. And I think that really latched on for her and caused her, as in her profession as a pediatric doctor, to step out of that for a moment and say, we need to fight for these kids whose lives are on the line. And I think that was a really inspiring interview for me. So many inspiring interviews.
Yeah. Well, and the other one that I mentioned, the one in Cancer Alley with Mary, and she is driving through her neighborhood and just pointing to house after house after house. That person died of cancer. That person's sick. That person died of cancer. And all the way till she gets to her childhood friend's home, whom she knew since kindergarten, and that person also, and the amount of rate of children and now grandchildren being born, because it's been 40 years, being born with asthma. So they're suffering from that from the get-go. I mean, that's, when you hear those kinds of stories, it's really hard to ignore. I think there's another story element that I'd like to point to, and that is the archive, because I do think that the historical context is really important. It's not that all of a sudden things are so bad now. The Clean Air Act has, in fact, cleaned up. I mean, I'm from California. I remember going to Los Angeles to my grandparents. You couldn't see the mountains. My eyes were just streaming because of the pollution. You could smell it. And that's largely cleaned up. And that's an amazing success story for the Clean Air Act. But you also, so through that archive, you see what it used to be. And even in Clairton, the little town down the road in 1948 had a number of people killed because of an air pollution inversion layer. So there's that story too, I think is so important, because that's where we know that we've made progress, but there is a lot still to be done. And that if we can get more engaged, the Clean Air Act is so powerful, but it really is only as good as its enforcement, and all of us getting involved to see that enforcement through. And now we're in an election year, and it's more important than ever. And the very end story of the film is a youth activist group. Trishwanda is a co-founder of Free Your Voice in Baltimore that formed and brought the community together through their young voices to really fight against the building of yet another incinerator in Baltimore city area. And they won, and they won. And it just was so important to end the film on that note that yes, we can come together, we can be a very powerful voice, and we can affect change and further progress in the fight for healthy air.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I think it's so easy to get overwhelmed when you're looking at these daunting issues. And Elizabeth, I think it is, when you brought up that the Clean Air Act is a public health law. I mean, it is about, it's nice to have beautiful skies, definitely, but it's critical to consider the health impacts that this air pollution has, and celebrate what we have done and what we can continue to do when we come together, like Free Your Voice did in Baltimore. And it is just such a powerful reminder at the end of the film, not to give it away, but on that note, this is Children's Environmental Health Day, and the Lung Association is so excited to be an official partner again for the Children's Environmental Health Network, and so grateful that they're leading this day. And so to close, I would love to hear from both of you, what are the ways that you hope this film can be helpful to those working to protect children's environmental health?
Well, I think to Maggie's point about the story we kind of end the film with the youth in just outside of Baltimore and Hersfeld, I think it is inspirational. I think they're particularly inspirational. They were going to have a trash incinerator built within a mile of their school, and as soon as they learned of that the school board had already signed on, the local governments had already signed on, that this was essentially happening, they took a stand. And I think that's the power of the Clean Air Act. You have that ability to stand up and speak your voice and have it be heard. I think that's a powerful thing. I mean, to your point too, Diana, that this is a public health law, I think it's a great film for decision makers and policy makers to show that these health impacts really unduly affect people of these types of communities, like Curtis Bay, who are lower income, who are Black primarily, who have systemically kind of been exposed to air pollution over a long period of time. I think the film does a great job. Gina McCarthy's quote in it, connecting it to, if it's your family, your kids, you're going to care about it. I think that's particularly poignant. And the film, I think, does a good job of that. And I hope it speaks to decision makers, because a lot of impact happens there.
Yeah, I really hope this film is used far and wide. And, it's as we're all seeing with the tremendous wildfires and other outcomes of our climate crisis, it's urgent. It's urgent. And I think if there's any one overriding message, it's that we can do this. If we all get together and we get involved, we can do this. We can make sure that there's healthy air for everyone. And it's not even a question of should we, shouldn't we? It's a we must. We really must.
You're absolutely right. And I'm really grateful that you made this film. It's really wonderful, and I'm so glad that we can share it with others today. Before I introduce the film officially, I would be remiss to not point out that Elizabeth has put together a wonderful site, unbreathable.org, where there's more information about the film. And the Lung Association has actually put together a healthy air activist toolkit and to help anyone who wants to host their own screening with discussion guides and more. So if you're moved by this film and want to learn more or show it in your community, check out the organization or feel free to reach out to me directly. But we hope you enjoyed the film. Maggie and Elizabeth, any final words before we turn it over to the film?
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you. Oh, sorry, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo thank you, and I hope you enjoy the film and vote.
Yes, vote.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much. And without further ado, enjoy the film.